Live from Washington, D.C., Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Sekulow.
So we are announcing that we've undertaken the most significant U.S. federal court case in defense of Israel's legitimacy as a Jewish state. Palestinian activists who are opposed to the legitimacy of Israel and even the existence of Israel have filed a $1 billion lawsuit against a number of companies, towns, government officials, but also the Gush Etzion Foundation. Gush Etzion plays a unique role in modern Israel history. David Ben-Gurion said, if there exists a Jewish Jerusalem, our foremost thanks go to the defenders of Gush Etzion. They have now been sued by these Palestinian activists who are charging civil conspiracy, war crimes, aiding and abetting the commission of war crimes, and aggravated and ongoing trespass. Trespass because they believe that the land should not be Israel's to begin with. And by the way, if President Obama, Jordan, had his way and returned to the 67 borders, Gush Etzion would not be part of the Jewish state of Israel.
No, that's exactly right.
And that's what he wants.
This would certainly not be included. It's, within now the West Bank, and these are, you're close to some major Palestinian cities. The one that people listening to this broadcast who have visited Israel would know that the most obviously would be Bethlehem. It's still a place where people, most of the time, as long as it's safe to travel, will make that journey out of the formal boundaries of the state of Israel into the West Bank territory. But I will say, different than the Gaza Strip, the West Bank is still very much in control of by the Israelis. They run the security apparatuses. You will see Israeli military moving freely through the West Bank. And though the Palestinians love to complain about this, they're headquartered up, if you're watching our broadcast on Facebook and Periscope, in that city, Ramallah. They love to complain about this. They need them because the radical terrorists in cities like Hebron, Ramallah, even in Jericho, to some extent, will attempt to utilize these zones as safe havens to operate terror because there's not a very strong Palestinian Authority military.
Yep. All right, so we've got a lot more on this.
Force.
Yeah, but we're going to have a lot more of this later in the week as well. But let's take a call, Logan.
Tracy, who's calling from Portland, Oregon, on line 4.
Hey, Tracy.
Hi. I want to thank you guys first for all you do,
Thanks.
all the cases you try, but also I believe this is one of the most important, if not the most important case you guys will be involved in. And the Bible is very clear about God's heart for Israel and what our heart is to be as Christians, to stand for, with, and behind, and to pray for. So just thank you guys for what you're doing.
Well, we couldn't do it without our supporters, and we appreciate that. Our Director of Public Policy, Harry Hutchison, pointed out an excellent editorial that was in the Wall Street Journal today, and it talks about the fact remains that over the past 70 years, the Arab world has gotten rid of its Jews. That's what he says, some 900,000 people, while holding on to its hatred of them. This is exactly what this case is about. Over time, the result proved fatal, a combination of lost human capital, ruthlessly expensive wars, misdirected ideological obsessions, and an intellectual life perverted by a conspiracy theory and perpetual search for scapegoats. The Arab world's problems are a problem of the Arab mind, and the name of that problem is anti-Semitism. And Than and Jordan, you've just been saying that. Than, quickly respond to that. I want Jordan to as well. You all have been pointing that out. That's what this is.
Well, the epicenter of the anti-Semitism lies at the United Nations too, Jay, which is why that speech you gave there 6 weeks ago was so significant. I would just quickly say, how can a lawsuit like this be filed in an area that historically significant? A lot of it is because the President of the United States also agrees with a border that is based on those 67 borders.
Yeah, and Jordan, you said this during the break. A return to these borders is indefensible.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the Israel, you see where Jerusalem is. People can see where Jerusalem is on the map if they're watching our broadcast on Facebook and Periscope. But it's so close, and Jerusalem being the city that everyone wants, basically, especially Muslims as well, because of it's the holiest city in the world. And so you have these major world religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all converging there, which they do, by the way, in the modern state of Israel. But yes, I mean, you could imagine now, and I'll try to explain it for our radio audience, trying to defend the major city you live near, but bordering a hostile country, so having no perimeter around that city. Imagine that.
Yep. Here is the President of the United States about those borders.
We believe the borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps so that secure and recognized borders are established for both states.
Folks, again, if you want to stand with us, we encourage you to do so at aclj.org or call us right now at 1-877-989-2255 to add your name to this petition, standing with Israel against this lawsuit. You can make a big impact and a big difference. Again, aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255.
Israel is under constant deadly terrorist knife and rocket attacks. Jewish students, professors, and Christians who support Israel face vicious discrimination at U.S. universities, all in an attempt to delegitimize the state of Israel. Israel is our ally, the Jewish people our friends. It's our duty to defend them. That's why the ACLJ is launching a massive new multinational legal campaign in defense of Israel, in the U.S., at the UN, and with world leaders. But we need these global leaders to hear from you now. Add your name to our new petition, a petition to defend Israel from anti-Israel attacks across the globe. Call now, 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. Or you can add your name online, aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. It was just 6 weeks ago that I was before the United Nations at the General Assembly giving a defense of Israel. 6 weeks later, we're now from the United Nations to the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C., defending Israel in that court case. But let me take you back to the United Nations to get a sense of what I talked about.
My grandfather, Shmulik Sekulow, traveled from Russia in 1914 aboard a boat that took him past the Statue of Liberty. He was a fruit peddler in Brooklyn, New York. His grandson, me, I get to argue cases at the Supreme Court of the United States, in international tribunals, and now appear before you. It is humbling. But the task that we have before us is great, and we have no time for delay. In one of my very first Supreme Court arguments, one of the legal journals said I was rude, aggressive, and obnoxious. That's what my mother did too. She applauded at that. We won that case unanimously. And in 2009, we opened our permanent office in Jerusalem. 1 year later, I found myself before the International Criminal Court in The Hague, the ICC. The Palestinian Authority, much like the BDS movement of today, sought to utilize an international tribunal for one purpose, and one purpose only: to delegitimize the Jewish state of Israel. I argued the law, and the law was clear. The Palestinian Authority was not a state. It had no business being before the ICC, and the case must be dismissed. 2 years later, that law was established and the court did dismiss that action. That's a victory, but the fact of the matter is, BDS is the flip side of that same coin. We call it lawfare, utilizing the legal system to delegitimize a people or a group. It is not a civil rights movement. It is a movement with one aim and one aim only. It is a long-term project created by anti-Israel and anti-Jewish activists that is designed with one purpose: to delegitimize and destroy the state of Israel, to delegitimize the Jewish people, to delegitimize those non-Jewish people that stand with Israel. This is the agenda. They cloak it in the garb of the civil rights movement. This is no civil rights movement. This is an unconstitutional and illegal advocacy taking place in the United States of America. Make no mistake, the goal is unambiguous. The intent is clear. It is to create an environment so hostile that those students of you that are here today would be afraid to say the word, I am a Zionist, I am a Jew. Never, never, on the memory of our families, should we allow that to take place, and the least in the United States of America. In the past year, ACLJ lawyers have briefed 30 state legislatures on passing laws specifically to protect students, businesses, and others from this boycott, divest, and sanction scheme. We believe that this year we will see that legislation passed in a number of states. I want to talk about the legal issues. You know, I make my living practicing law. I have represented a variety of groups around the globe. We have offices in Strasbourg, France, Jerusalem, 2 in Africa, in Moscow. But in the United States of America, we are seeing right now a marked upswing on college campuses and universities, this targeted BDS. And it comes in multiple forms. It is sometimes aimed at a student who merely speaks out, exercises his or her free speech right. One of those students from Loyola University is with us today. She's brave. She's a hero. She stood up for her people, and she did it at her college. And she was the one brought up on charges. Now hear me. She exercised free speech rights, was non-disruptive, was being harassed by the BDS proponents at Loyola University in Chicago. She spoke out for her rights, and she was being prosecuted by the college. That student, Talia Neiman, is here today. I'd like her to stand up, please, for a moment. We had the privilege and honor to work with her, to put the college, the university on notice that you better read your own rules. You better read your own regulations. You better read your own accrediting agency's principles, because it does not allow targeted discrimination because someone is Jewish or pro-Israel. And that fact, by the way, got Loyola to back down. That's some good news. But let me take it a step further. It is not just students. There are professors. We are handling a number of those right now. Some of those professors are Israeli. Most of them are Americans. Most of them, but not all of them, are Jewish. They have stood up for their rights as well. I'd like to recognize another professor that we successfully represented, who stood for his principles, spoke out on behalf of the state of Israel, was going to be sanctioned, is no longer being sanctioned. Professor Andrew Pessin is here as well. I'd like, Professor. He's in the back. Thank you, Professor, for taking the stand you did. The American Sociological Association decided to have a meeting at the Westin Hotel in California, in Los Angeles. They decided, however, that because of their support of Palestinian civil society, they would boycott Israeli academic institutions, the ASA said, but they were meeting at the Bonaventure Hotel. Hotels are places of public accommodation. Places of public accommodation don't host groups that harass or discriminate against someone because of their faith, who they are, or what they believe. The ASA was being aggressive. So was I. And the end result of that was that event took place, and as the ASA did not want to acknowledge, but did acknowledge, with Israeli academic participation. But it doesn't stop there. The United Auto Workers local college union, representing 4,000 graduate students, the University of California Student Workers Union, passed an BDS action. We went directly to the United Auto Workers Union, reminding them that they are now violating state and federal law, as is their chapter, because discrimination on the basis of national origin or race or religion is a violation. Not only did we notify the United Auto Workers, their local student workers union, but also the entire University of California system, whose chancellor sent out an email immediately. The provost said, reminding all university chancellors that the policy on course content at the UC system prohibits exactly what the UAW 2865 did. 1 year after 2865, 1 year after that labor union passed that resolution, the entire United Auto Workers passed their own resolution and nullified that BDS boycott. In its decision, the United Auto Workers representative stated that the local chapter had overstepped its parameters, that the resolution would harm UAW-represented workers and other unions, and the provisions of the resolution, despite semantical claims to the contrary by the local union, can easily be construed as academic and cultural discrimination. Here you had the United Auto Workers recognizing a chapter representing 4,000 individuals was violating the laws of the United States. We're in a struggle for life and death. It is a struggle. We will win. We have no option. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Folks, as you see, whether it's the United Nations or now whether it's the federal courts in Washington, D.C., the ACLJ front and center in defense of Israel, I want to encourage you to go to aclj.org or call us at 1-877-989-2255. I need you to add your name of support right now for our petition in support of Israel. It's easy to do it. aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255.
Israel is under constant deadly terrorist knife and rocket attacks. Jewish students, professors, and Christians who support Israel face vicious discrimination at U.S. universities, all in an attempt to delegitimize the state of Israel. Israel is our ally, the Jewish people our friends. It's our duty to defend them. That's why the ACLJ is launching a massive new multinational legal campaign in defense of Israel, in the U.S., at the UN, and with world leaders. But we need these global leaders to hear from you now. Add your name to our new petition, a petition to defend Israel from anti-Israel attacks across the globe. Call now, 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. Or you can add your name online, aclj.org.
We got a lot of people holding. We're going to send some of you, well, all of you, because you've been holding it a long time. We're going to send you Rise of ISIS. So we appreciate that. All right, let's go right to the phones, Logan.
All right, let's go to Larry, who's been on 34 minutes. Thanks, Larry. You're on the air.
Probably send Larry to Rise of ISIS. Go ahead, Larry. You're on the air.
Yeah, God bless your work. God bless your team, and thank you for everything y'all do.
Sure.
I'm gonna try to be really quick with you. Every day that I catch your radio program, you're feeding us information, and you're fighting battles that it seems to me Congress should be controlling or have oversight over. And I hear other people calling in asking you, what can we do? You know, other than the election process where people, we got to vote the right person in or vote them out, is there any legal mechanism that we can use for a gross negligence.
Sure, we're doing that. I mean, we're right now in federal court against the State Department. We're in federal court against the IRS. We just won at the Court of Appeals of the IRS. We're fighting the State Department right now on the fraud they told us on this Iran deal. We've got Freedom of Information Act requests out to Homeland Security about why they took the word Islamic out of their training manuals. And then we do, and I don't want to give Congress a short shrift here. There's been a number of members of Congress that have been very helpful, and in fact, we've testified a number of times. That's an important part of what we do, Stan.
Well, I think they can be both complimented and urged on to more action. I mean, just yesterday there was a follow-up letter from the Oversight Committee on the whole issue of perjury to the Congress as far as Hillary Clinton's testimony. We've worked with them closely on that. But I will say this to the caller. We have consistently called for them to use the power of the purse and withhold funding from agencies that engage in this kind of abuse more effectively than they have. And this fall, Jay, when they return next month, we're going to do that again. There's more they can do.
All right, we're going to go right back to those phones. 1-800-684-3110.
Take more to Jerry. 26 minutes. You're on the air.
All right, Jerry, you're getting the book.
Springs.
Hey, Jerry.
Okay, talks
Hi there. It's great to be talking with you guys.
Thanks.
So I'm calling in full support of our position in defending Israel
Great.
for two important reasons. Number one, it's probably one, if not the only nation in the Middle East where one can truly be free,
Correct.
no matter where you're from. No matter where you're from.
Right.
And number two, they are our front line in our fight against radical Islam.
Well, look, I mean, you're right on two fronts. It is the freest democracy, Jordan, in the Middle East. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. And number two, and people need to understand this, the intelligence gathering capability of the Israeli Defense Forces, the Shin Bet, the Mossad, the intelligence agencies, has been vital to keeping radical Islam, at least in the battle, that we can have correct intelligence. And you can't ignore for a moment Israel's role there, Jordan. That's why we're so aggressive in our defense, folks. Look, we're at the UN at the end of the May. In the middle of August, we're in federal court. I mean, what else can I say other than that?
Yeah, and this is such an important ally for the United States. Our most important ally, I would say, in modern times, because of the fight against radical Islamic terrorism. It doesn't just have to be about our connection, our Judeo-Christian heritage. That's important, I know, for our audience.
Right.
But for the United States, big picture, 10,000 feet, we're looking down upon this. Why is this so important? It's the only democracy in the Middle East that's functioning that hasn't been taken over by radical Islamic groups like Lebanon and Hezbollah or Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And we have other allies. They're not democracies. Those other allies are basically kings with unlimited power. So they've been able to somewhat keep their people in check, if you will. But this is our real ally, and stronger militarily than most of Europe. In Europe, we can utilize the larger NATO structure. But if you try to point out one individual country amongst that's kind of difficult to say, is the UK more important than France? And whose military is stronger? Israel's right on the front line. We work with them on developing technology to aid our troops, to protect our troops, to protect our own homeland as they protect theirs. And because of that relationship, regardless of who the president is, it is very important to defend Israel, both on the airwaves, but also when we have to go to court.
And that's what we're doing right now. Again, if you're just joining us, we are in federal court on that very issue right now, defending Israel. Go ahead, Logan. Who's next?
Let's go to Jack in Harrisburg, PA.
Hi, Jack.
How you doing?
Yep.
I appreciate the time and effort and work that your organization is putting in. I have a question. Why? Now, I am absolutely convinced that the Obama administration is flat out anti-Semitic. Any Clinton administration probably would follow suit. Why then do the Jewish people in this country predominantly vote for administrations like the Clinton and
there is a Jewish Republican group as well, but probably a majority, certainly, of Jews in America vote for Democrats. And you know what that's called? It's called a free country. And then that's changing. You do see a lot more Jewish Republicans. In fact, some of the leading Republican fundraisers you talk about Shelley Adelson and some of these individuals that put a lot of money behind Israel over the years. And there's a lot of that. And in Hollywood, too. They're just more discreet. But then, that's a good political question.
Well, but let me tell you, just politically speaking, this administration has done great harm to especially Senate Democrats in this regard. I was talking to a couple of people about a couple of competitive races in the Senate, and one of the biggest factors working against the Democrat in those races is the president's position on Israel and on the Jewish community. So, historically speaking, there's a pretty close divide. In this cycle, the president is hurting Senate Democrats.
Yeah. That's right. When you hear any of these organizations speak out against Israel, you usually automatically hear from a large section of Hollywood who comes out in straight defense of Israel.
Yeah.
Even if they're liberal leaning on every other issue, this is where they are not. There'll be petitions, there'll be ads in Variety. You will see big support from Israel from Hollywood, from the major corporations, Hollywood, the major companies, and the major personalities. So, you're right that they may lean liberal, but not on this. Typically overwhelming.
Yeah, I'd say way overwhelming.
Yep. All right, let's go to William in Macon, Georgia.
Hey, William, you're on.
Hey, Jay. First of all, real quick, I thank God for this opportunity that we had to support Israel at this magnitude. But here's my question.
Okay.
With all that President Obama has done, especially with these releasing to get more prisoners, I think I already got the conclusion for myself, but I want to hear from you guys. Do you think he's really trying to destroy the very fabric of what America stands for?
Well, I mean, he has a different worldview, Jordan, it's fair to say. He has a different worldview on how he views America and our role in the world. I mean, that's this is the leading from behind, and that's why he would try to close Gitmo, which he's not going to be able to do, by the way.
Yeah, I think Hillary Clinton actually has some space here to make more of a contrast. Now, she's instead kind of fully embraced this Obama strategy, so I don't think we're going to see that right now. Maybe in the debates when she's pressed a bit, because she is certainly, and I think this is important to point out, Donald Trump mentioned Israel yesterday in his speech, but she is certainly doing something different from President Obama. Policy aside, politically, she is directly trying to take her record and saying, I'm great for Israel.
Yep.
And so she's actually, I think, at least trying to sound, whether the policy matches that on the Iran deal, but she sounds hawkish.
Okay.
She sounds like she cares about Israel a lot more than President Obama did.
That's going to do it for the broadcast today, everybody. Again, as we close this broadcast out, you could take a stand for the state of Israel. We're defending Israel in federal court. You could be part of that defense team. Go to aclj.org or call us at 1-877-989-2255 and add your name of support for Israel. Critical that you do it. Sign this petition today. I want hundreds of thousands of signatures. aclj.org or 1-877-989-2255.
Israel is under constant deadly terrorist knife and rocket attacks. Jewish students, professors, and Christians who support Israel face vicious discrimination at U.S. universities, all in an attempt to delegitimize the state of Israel. Israel is our ally, the Jewish people our friends. It's our duty to defend them. That's why the ACLJ is launching a massive new multinational legal campaign in defense of Israel, in the U.S., at the UN, and with world leaders. But we need these global leaders to hear from you now. Add your name to our new petition, a petition to defend Israel from anti-Israel attacks across the globe. Call now, 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255. Or you can add your name online, aclj.org.